Key point 1. Data is a decisive argument in the fight for equality. What do fewer conflicts and better education have in common? The answer is higher participation of women as policymakers. Numerous cases confirm the outstanding outcomes of female leaders. When they join negotiations with countries at war, the probability that a peace agreement will last over 14 years rises by 35%. Similarly, Portugal's expenditure on schools has increased with more female members of parliament. Although the positive results of women's contributions are undeniable, many male-dominated fields resist gender equality. After hearing about female protests against discrimination, men often complain there are too many conversations about gender. They consider the world already equal for everyone. This belief is hardly surprising. The gulf between the sexes is tricky. While women experience it daily, men seldom witness or read about it due to the data gap. The latter stems from two factors. Firstly, scientists collect less information about the female lifestyle. We will discover the reasons for this soon. Secondly, even when their research includes women, they rarely separate data by sex. Why is it a problem? Data is a powerful leverage for transformation and decision-making. For example, when Google discovered that new mothers quit at twice the rate of other employees, it prolonged maternity leave at full pay. The number of dismissals dropped by 50%. As long as half of humanity is invisible in statistics, its needs and challenges will remain a niche knowledge. Combating the data gap will improve women's health, increase GDP, and reduce the crime rate. Let's investigate how data gaps impede society's thriving and discover worldwide recipes for coping with this challenge. The findings will impress you. Key point 2. How data-led design saves lives. Are you tired of ever-present smartphones? If so, we have good news for you. Experts say devices won't get any bigger since they've reached the maximum size of men's hands. It's one of the simplest examples of how the male perspective impacts the design of most things around us. That's also why fitness trackers underestimate calories burned during housework, and makeup can glitch VR headsets. Some consequences of this one-track design are only inconveniences, but others may cost lives. Most commodities by default reflect male characteristics. Have you ever wondered why women are 47% more likely to get severe injuries in car crashes than men? Data from vehicle tests can shed light on it. Researchers use a dummy 177 centimeters, or 5.8 feet tall, and 76 kilograms, or 167 pounds. Indeed, it doesn't represent the parameters of at least half of society. Although a female crash test dummy may seem a reasonable solution, proportions aren't the only challenge. Women sit more upright and closer to the pedals due to their height. Yet, the data gap made engineers consider this position uncommon. We can notice a crucial belief that hinders men from realizing blind spots. Instead of rethinking their devices, they blame women for problems. For example, that's what happened when men designed clean stoves for low-income countries. Over 75% of the people in South Asia use biomass fuel, such as wood or leaves for cooking. Usually, it takes more than 3 hours to prepare a meal. Most of the time, women breathe fumes which are highly toxic, akin to 100 cigarettes per day. It drastically influences their health. However, when organizations provided families with clean stoves, appliances gathered dust in corners. What were the scientists' assumptions? They stereotypically thought that women lacked education. But after collecting data, they realized that new stoves took longer to cook and required constant attention. It wasn't an option for women who had to multitask. Fortunately, in 2015, a group of researchers devised a new tool to resolve this challenge. When placed in traditional stoves, the device improved airflow and decreased fumes. This data-led design has helped many people in Kenya, India, and Ghana. Blame shifting also happens in high-income countries. One company faced fierce criticism when its voice recognition software worked poorly for women's commands. Executives responded that users had to train more. Yet the actual reason was that technology had learned from messages recorded chiefly by men. Key point 3. The transport system is biased against women. Men's design goes far beyond commodities. Urban planning also bears its mark. For instance, the transportation sphere is highly male-dominated, so commutes and peak travel hours are its focus. As a result, London's public transport system resembles a spider web. On the one hand, it allows people to reach offices downtown quickly. On the flip side, it makes other trips inconvenient. But they aren't common anyway, right? This misconception dominated for a long time until Spanish scientists investigated women's travel patterns. It turned out that trips for caring purposes like taking children to kindergarten or a doctor are as frequent as for employment. So it makes economic sense to add new public transport routes that satisfy these needs. A compromise solution is introducing hopper fare as London did. This way, citizens can use unlimited trams or buses for an hour without paying for each trip. As women run errands daily, it benefits their lives enormously. Most car owners are men. For instance, in Rio de Janeiro, 71% are male. Concentrating on commutes creates another blind spot for male urban planners: walkways. Governments are more likely to finance new roads than fix cracked pavements. Do they realize how their decisions affect women with baby carriages? It's one more data gap. Another result of the male approach is snow clearing that starts from the main roads. Icy conditions increase the number of injuries, and women are at high risk. Swedish city Umeå has calculated that women comprise 69% of hospital patients in slippery weather. So Swedish authorities took measures and prioritized pedestrian and public transport. The results surprised them. They not only made the city safer, but also saved money. Healthcare and loss of productivity cost a lot. Snow isn't the only factor that makes transportation dangerous for female citizens. Sexual harassment is a pressing issue. According to studies, 90% of French women experienced it while commuting in 2016. They seldom report about it, believing it won't change anything. Thus, the data gap is tremendous. Some female workers even quit their jobs to avoid public transport. At the same time, some measures can improve this situation. One of the most effective is transport conductors. There are also less expensive fixes, as crimes happen 3 times more often at stops than at vehicles. Making bus and tram shelters well-lit and transparent contributes to better safety. Key point 4. Unpaid labor drastically affects women's income. One recent study revealed that working 50 hours per week has opposite effects on the sexes. While men have less risk of depression, women are more susceptible to severe diseases. Moreover, even 41 to 45 hours may cause mental health problems for female employees. Are they weaker than their male colleagues? Not at all. Unpaid work like domestic chores and caring for children cause the difference. Women do 75% of this work worldwide. Health problems aren't the only upshot of this imbalance. The following are some other common ones: lower wages and pensions. Discrimination isn't the sole reason for female workers' underpayment. Many women, 42% in the UK, must choose reduced hours to juggle jobs and family. Caring for relatives, they earn less during their lifetimes, which reduces their retirement benefits. Some countries, like Brazil and Bolivia, implemented a solution: non-contributory pensions. It benefits women significantly. There is no such thing as a woman who doesn't work. There's only a woman who isn't paid for her work. Caroline Criado Perez. Losing jobs due to inefficient maternity leave system. An Australian study has revealed that receiving fair payments for over 7 months after giving birth guarantees a woman's return to work. However, no country provides it. For instance, in the UK, female workers receive a third of their wages for 39 weeks. Contrarily, Croatia provides their female citizens with 30-week maternity leave at full pay. The positive news is that some companies support women by themselves. Organizing after-school classes or summer schools has become a new trend, but a flexible schedule and working online would be an even more effective solution. Women's labor participation benefits the whole of society. According to the World Economic Forum, it's a decisive factor for European economic growth in the last 10 years. The data gap in unpaid work prevents governments from understanding the potential of social infrastructure. They consider it a burden for economics, whereas the opposite is true. Estimates prove that investing 2% of the U.S. GDP in the construction sector will create 7.5 million jobs. In care industries, 13 million. Besides, it will allow thousands of mothers to participate in the labor market, increasing the country's GDP. At the same time, work has other challenges that don't relate to the duty of care. Stories from #MeToo, the movement against sexual abuse, are eloquent examples. Key point 5. Science used to misjudge gender differences. Healthcare is essential for our well-being, so we often believe it has enough data. But let's read medical textbooks. Page after page, we will see no mention of gender differences in chapters about the respiratory and digestive systems and the like. Scientific articles aren't an exception. After testing medicine only on men, researchers may claim that it will improve women's health. This approach needs to be corrected. Recent studies prove that each organ system has sex peculiarities. Moreover, the course and syndromes of diseases also depend on gender. The following are just a few examples. The immune system. Women have higher antibody responses. As a result, their reactions to vaccination are stronger and more harmful. In 2014, scientists even stated we should develop different types of influenza vaccines depending on sex. Skin thickness. The female dermis is thinner than the male, which has many consequences. For instance, a higher risk of chemical exposure for women. However, there are no studies about how various toxic substances, widespread in products for domestic chores, together influence female health. Sensitivity for pain. Men feel it less intensely, and their responses have become a medical norm. Therefore, doctors may disregard female aching as atypical. Believing it's emotional or psychosomatic, they prescribe antidepressants instead of painkillers. As a result, women consume them 2.5 times more, although studies prove that men are more likely to fall into depression. Different common symptoms of diseases. A typical test for tuberculosis is to analyze the sputum of the patient, but women rarely cough it up, complicating diagnosing TB. Unusual effects of treatment. When we Google the impacts of resistance training on those with hypertension, many websites associate it with increased artery stiffness. It's true, but only for men. These exercises lower blood pressure in men and women, but have a lesser impact on women's arterial stiffness. The same treatment may have opposite effects for different sexes. Imagine how many beneficial medicines we lost because they didn't work for men. The good news is that countries enact laws to reduce the data gap. For instance, scientists must study both sexes in federally funded clinical trials in the US, EU, and Australia. Some institutions, like the German Society of Epidemiology and the Canadian Institutes of Health, require researchers to consider gender in their works. Did you know anorexia may indicate autism? As men seldom have this symptom, researchers neglected it for a long time. Key point 6. Why women's participation in science is fundamental. Nowadays, gender inequality is remarkably less than in the past. So why does the data gap continue to exist? Psychology explains that all humans are susceptible to projection bias. They make us assume others share our patterns and attitudes. It's not always easy to convince someone a need exists if they don't have that need themselves. Caroline Criado-Perez. The gap is inevitable when a field lacks diversity. A science is a telling example. It's still a male-dominated sphere worldwide. Female researchers often remain invisible, and gender biases are the culprits. For instance, journals more often accept women's articles under double-blind review, which means reviewers know nothing about the author. The existence of this discrepancy is worrying news. Receiving funding and being cited are also less common for women. For instance, Susan Ray's discovery predicts when doctors should use a cesarean. Moreover, she has found a way to increase the number of those who can give birth without surgery, from 67% to 84%. It's groundbreaking, as a C-section could be dangerous in some regions due to a lack of equipment and medical skills. Yet she received a rejection in funding. Sponsors regarded her project as not a priority. Fortunately, many organizations have emerged to support female scientists, like the foundation of Christine Nusslein-Volhard, a Nobel Prize laureate. Increasing the number of women in science and supporting their initiatives will quickly reduce the data gap. STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is a core field that requires change. Only 25% of workers in the tech industry are women, and the long-term consequences of it are disturbing. Artificial intelligence not only reflects, but also multiplies the biases of its authors. What does it mean in practice? When people search for a programmer or other male occupation, men's websites will pop up first. That's because algorithms will consider them more relevant. AI-based recruitment tools will decrease opportunities for women's employment. It already happens. Algorithms of some tech hiring platforms make discriminatory assumptions. For instance, they suppose excellent IT specialists are active on manga websites. Yet women often have other interests and don't comply with this requirement. Some codes are less biased, but companies should choose to use them. As female executives in tech constitute 11%, the implementation may take a lot of time. Key point 7. Data alone isn't enough. Society should act on it. In 2014, BI Norwegian Business School singled out 5 attributes of influential leaders. Women surpass men in 4. Nevertheless, statistics about policymakers state that gender equality is far from attainment. This tendency impedes economic growth and the elimination of the data gap. Scientific findings will make a change only when we use them. Politics is a crucial sphere. U.S. studies have calculated that female parliamentarians focus more on women's needs and rights, but they constitute less than a quarter of the world's politicians. Quotas can be an effective solution. Yet, although scientists confirm they increase the competence of the government, many take this practice with a pinch of salt. They believe the situation must change naturally, but reality proves them wrong. In 1972, the Swedish Social Democratic Party advised that electoral lists include more women. Neither this nor other similar measures transformed gender representation in parliament. Thus, the party established a zipper quota in 1993. In a nutshell, it's when male and female politicians alternate on the list. After that, more women finally join the government. At the same time, a third of female local politicians in Sweden are thinking about leaving their posts. Threats in their address make the job unbearable. Data proves it's a worldwide challenge. The fact that 93% of venture capitalists are men is bad news for female entrepreneurs. This field is a primary source of financing tech startups, so its gender imbalance notably lowers the support for women's projects. For example, when Debbie Waskow co-founded Albright to invest in female innovators, her male colleagues considered her idea a charity. They were shocked to hear Waskow planned to earn money through it. Boston Consulting Group revealed that financing women's startups is over $1 million less than men's, yet the revenue from their products is higher. Another crucial area is disaster management. Female citizens suffer more from natural catastrophes due to men's violence and gender inequality. For instance, parents don't teach girls swimming and tree climbing in Sri Lanka. They see them as male skills. Thus, women are more likely to suffer from floodwaters. Planning refugee camps also needs a female point of view. A small detail neglected by men, the absence of separate bathrooms, increases the risk of violence against women. Did you know? In Bangladesh, female citizens can't go out alone, only with a male relative. So they waste precious evacuation time during a natural disaster. Conclusion. Did you know that Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin discovered that stars are composed primarily of hydrogen and helium? We are unlikely to find it in our textbooks. Similarly, stories about the Ice Age rarely mention that women drew famous cave paintings in France and Spain. In the same way, many Americans believe their country doesn't possess the World Cup. Yet the women's national soccer team has won it 4 times. These gaps aren't a coincidence. They are consequences of a culture shaped by the male perspective. Many spheres in our life are designed by men and for men, from devices to public space. However, more and more projects emerge to redress the balance. When Sweden introduced a month of parental leave, which must be used only by fathers or would disappear, the number of those who took it increased remarkably. Now, South Korea and Iceland have implemented this model. In India, activists have created a platform to collect data about dangerous districts. It warns women and enables them to choose the safest public transport route. Several IT companies practice blind recruitment systems. As a result, they have hired 60% of employees with atypical backgrounds. Initiatives vary, but most thrive to close the gender representation gap. This way, one person's success can benefit hundreds. For example, female scientists focus on issues particular for women, while female journalists are likely to report on these findings. Change starts with the understanding that doing nothing perpetuates gender inequality. It's time for everyone to realize we are in the same boat. Thus, attention to others' needs benefits all of us. Try this. Watch TED Talks by women leaders and discover how they make a change daily. Read a book about minorities to enrich yourself with their perspectives. And research the women's participation in your country's politics.